So the next section of the book I want to go over is how we determine what to include in writing history. And some professors you have now might focus on this more than others, but it's still important to go over. The first major concept that gets introduced here is called historiography. And essentially what historiography is the idea that it's the study of how we should write history. It's pretty straightforward, I think. So there are a few different types of approaches you can take when studying history, and those all fall under the main sphere of historiography. So the first question that comes to mind is, what should we include? And in determining what to include, there are two main philosophical approaches. The first is called presentism, which is when we take our present worldview and apply it to the past in order to understand what we truly understand in the past. So to explain that a little bit better, I'm sorry if my explanations are a little bit difficult to understand, but so presentism is when we are looking back at something and we're viewing it through a modern lens. Like, for example, we know now that racism is wrong, so we look back at the 1860s and slavery, and we call all the slave owners evil bigots for owning slaves. Now, on the other hand, there is the historical view known as historicism, which is studying the past for its own sake and trying to understand the past as the people from the past understood it then. So basically, we're stepping outside of our own shoes and trying to, as best we can, live the lives of the people who lived during that time and try to understand the way they thought and how it shaped history back then because of the way they thought. Now, the next question in determining how we should write history and psychology is how to approach the actual focus in the writing. And there are a couple of different approaches here that you can take. The first one is called the great person approach. And essentially what that is instead of focusing on everything everyone has ever contributed to whatever we're writing on in history, we focus on the work that has been the most influential from the most influential individuals. So that's why it's called the great person approach. For example, we would only pay attention to Sigmund Freud, not necessarily the work that lesser known psychologists have done to expand his work. The next approach is the historical development approach, which contrasts the great person approach because it focuses on basically one idea and how that idea changes over time, and it does go into the more specific changes as the idea progresses. And then finally, there's the eclectic approach, where the historian just takes whatever method they deem to be most appropriate at the time of for the topic or at the time of the writing, and that's the approach that the author takes in this book. So if you see there to be more focus on some ideas rather than others, that would be why.